Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be tackling something that I think is pretty important to a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Home ownership,
Yeah.
specifically in Malaysia.
Okay.
Um, and we actually got this great paper sent in
Oh, awesome.
called Building Affordable Housing in Urban Malaysia, Economic and Institutional Challenges to Housing Developers.
That's a mouthful.
Yeah, it is a mouthful.
Sounds like a good one, though.
So we're going to be looking at that today and
No,
kind of diving into
thanks, that's good.
why it's so difficult for people, even with decent incomes,
Yeah.
to get on the property ladder these days.
Yeah, for sure. I think this paper is a really good choice for that.
Okay.
Because, we see a lot of headlines about supply and demand,
Right.
but this one really digs into what the developers are dealing with when they're trying to build affordable housing.
And it kind of takes us past that
Yeah.
greedy developer kind of narrative.
Right. Exactly. It challenges that simple view,
Yeah.
and it shows that there's a lot more going on.
Okay, well, let's start with that developer perspective then.
Okay.
What are some of the biggest hurdles that they face when they're trying to build affordable housing in Malaysia?
Well, one of the first things that the paper points out is that there's no consistent national standard
Oh, really?
for affordable housing. So it can vary from state to state and even city to city.
So they're kind of trying to hit a moving target then.
Yeah, exactly. How can you plan and, get financing and figure out your costs when you don't even know what you're aiming for?
Yeah.
So that ambiguity creates a lot of uncertainty for developers.
And then on top of that, you've got the land issue.
Oh, yeah. Huge issue.
I know that especially in cities like Kuala Lumpur,
Mm-hmm.
land prices have just skyrocketed.
They've absolutely exploded.
Yeah.
The paper mentions an increase of 150% in the past decade alone.
150%.
Yeah, it's insane.
That's crazy.
So you can imagine how difficult it is for developers to
Right.
acquire land at a price that allows them to build truly affordable housing.
I can definitely see that, especially if they're trying to make some kind of profit margin as well.
For sure. And the paper goes into the specific challenges that developers face, especially the smaller firms.
Right.
It's not just about, winning a bidding war.
Right.
It's navigating a system where political connections often play a role.
Now, I do want to touch on the fact that Malaysia does have some government programs
Yes.
that are aimed at providing affordable housing, like My First Home and PR1MA.
Right.
But even with those programs,
Mm-hmm.
that affordability gap is still there.
Yeah, it's a big problem.
So why is that?
I think those programs are a good step, but as the paper points out,
Okay.
they often miss the mark.
Okay.
So, for example, PR1MA is designed for middle-income earners,
Mm.
but a lot of times the location of these projects is far from city centers, and that impacts, accessibility and commute times.
And if you're spending 2 hours commuting each way, then you're not really saving that much money.
Exactly. Those savings get eaten up pretty quickly.
Right.
And even if the location is decent,
Yeah.
there's this huge issue with speculation
Oh, speculation.
that the paper highlights.
Okay.
It talks about how these investor clubs,
Investor clubs.
yeah, are buying up these affordable units,
Right.
not to live in, but to flip for profit.
So it's not even going to the people who need it.
Exactly. It's supposed to help people achieve home ownership,
Yeah.
but it's becoming an investment vehicle
Right.
for those who already have capital.
So they're kind of stuck in the middle then, these developers.
Yeah, they are. And the paper quotes a lot of developers who feel powerless to stop it.
Right.
At the end of the day, they're businesses.
Yeah, of course.
And if someone's willing to pay the asking price,
They're going to sell it.
there's not much they can do.
Yeah. I can understand their position as well.
Right.
So, okay. So if just building more houses isn't enough,
Mm-hmm.
what else is contributing to this affordability crisis in Malaysia?
Well, get ready because we're about to enter the world of Malaysian bureaucracy. The paper dedicates a whole section to the complex web of regulations and approvals
Okay.
that are required for any housing project.
This sounds like a headache already.
Oh, it is.
So give me a taste.
Okay.
How convoluted can this process get?
Imagine having to get approvals from multiple agencies at both the federal and state levels,
Oh, wow.
each with their own set of rules, timelines, and, Yeah. well, let's just say expectations.
Expectations. Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
But seriously, how does this impact the cost of actually building a house?
The paper uses this term transaction cost to describe all these hidden expenses.
Okay.
So think about it. The longer it takes to get approvals,
Mm-hmm.
the more it costs the developer.
Right.
They have to pay staff. They have to keep financing in place,
Right.
and potentially, navigate certain roadblocks.
Roadblocks. So we're talking about corruption now.
Let's just say that the paper sheds some light on how navigating this approval process
Okay.
often involves more than just submitting paperwork and waiting patiently.
So all these delays, these unofficial fees, these facilitation payments,
Right.
that all gets factored into the price of the house at the end.
Exactly, like a hidden tax.
Yeah, hidden tax on affordable housing.
Exactly.
Wow.
And it's not just the financial cost either.
Okay.
It's the time it takes to navigate this complex system.
Right.
One developer who was interviewed for the paper compared it to running a marathon through quicksand.
Oh, wow. That's a great visual.
Yeah.
So are there any solutions out there?
Yeah.
Like, is there any hope for affordable housing in Malaysia?
Don't worry, the paper isn't all doom and gloom.
Okay.
It actually offers a range of potential solutions.
Okay.
But we'll dive into those in just a bit.
All right. Sounds good.
Yeah.
So before we took a little break there, we were talking about these transaction costs
Right.
that make building affordable housing so difficult.
Yeah, and these costs go way beyond just like the price of land and materials.
All right.
They represent this like whole web of bureaucratic hurdles and regulatory uncertainties.
Yeah. And, sometimes even corruption.
It paints a pretty bleak picture, honestly.
Yeah, it does.
But you mentioned that the paper does offer some potential solutions.
It does.
So what can be done? Like, what are some concrete steps to address these issues?
Well, the paper argues that simply building more houses isn't enough.
Okay.
If the system itself is flawed,
Right.
it calls for a fundamental shift toward good governance.
Okay.
So that means promoting transparency and accountability and fairness
Mm-hmm.
at every level of the housing development process.
So it's like creating a system where the rules are clear.
Exactly.
The process is efficient.
Yes.
And everybody's playing by the same rules.
Exactly. That's the goal.
Okay.
And one specific recommendation that the paper makes is to create a single centralized agency
Okay.
to oversee housing development approvals.
So instead of having to go to all these different departments and ministries.
It would streamline the process
Okay.
and hopefully, reduce the opportunities for things to
To
get
get lost in the shuffle. Exactly.
too many cooks in the kitchen.
Exactly. Too many cooks spoil the broth.
Right.
And beyond just streamlining the process, the paper also emphasizes the need to make it more transparent.
Oh.
Imagine a public online platform where anyone can track the progress of a development application.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Right? It would hold everyone accountable.
Yeah.
And make it harder for delays or irregularities to slip through the cracks.
So more transparency leads to more trust.
Exactly.
Well.
And that the system is working for everyone, not just those with connections.
Right.
Yeah.
But what about the land issue?
Yeah,
Land prices are still skyrocketing.
they are.
So how can developers afford to buy land
Right.
at a reasonable price?
Well, this is where the paper gets really interesting because it goes beyond just blaming the market.
Okay.
It proposes a more active role for the government
Okay.
in land acquisition and allocation.
So instead of leaving it up to the developers to compete in the open market,
Yeah.
the government could acquire the land
Exactly.
and then make it available specifically for affordable housing.
That's the idea.
Okay, so it's not about nationalizing the housing market,
Right.
but it's about intervening strategically to
Exactly.
benefit the community.
Right. And the paper also suggests exploring innovative land use policies like density bonuses.
Density bonuses. Now, remind me what that is again?
Essentially, it's a way to incentivize developers to include affordable housing in their projects.
Okay.
They're allowed to build more units on a given plot of land
Okay.
if a certain percentage of those units are designated as affordable.
So the developer gets to build more.
Right.
The community gets more affordable housing.
Exactly. It's a win-win.
Okay.
In theory, at least.
But even with these measures we've talked about,
Yeah.
there's still the issue of speculation.
Right.
So how do we make sure that these affordable units actually end up in the hands
Yeah.
of the people who need them most?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And the paper suggests a few policies that are aimed at curbing speculation.
Huh?
Things like restricting bulk purchases and prioritizing first-time homebuyers.
Okay.
Imagine a system where you have to prove you intend to live in the unit for a certain period of time
Okay.
before you can even purchase it.
So that would get rid of all the people who are just trying to
Exactly.
claim it.
It would discourage those who are just looking to flip properties for a quick profit.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
It would be interesting to see if there were incentives for developers who prioritize selling to genuine homebuyers as well,
Absolutely.
like families
Mhm.
or individuals who meet certain income criteria.
Definitely. And on the financial side, the paper also explores ideas like imposing higher property taxes
Okay.
on units that are flipped within a short period of time.
So making it less appealing to just flip.
Exactly. Make it less financially attractive to treat affordable housing as just another investment opportunity.
I like that idea.
Yeah.
But it seems like all these solutions would require a pretty big shift in mindset,
They would-
not just from policymakers, but from developers as well.
Yeah, the paper acknowledges that changing the status quo won't be easy.
Right.
It requires strong political will,
Yeah.
a commitment to transparency, and a willingness to challenge these entrenched interests.
And it also requires buyers to be more informed as well, right?
Absolutely.
Because if people are willing to pay these inflated prices
Right.
for properties that they know are being flipped,
Yeah,
then it just continues the cycle.
exactly. Public awareness is key.
Yeah.
The paper emphasizes the need for education campaigns to inform potential buyers about the risks of speculation
Okay.
and the importance of responsible home ownership.
So it's about empowering buyers
Yeah,
to make informed decisions
exactly.
and holding both the developers and policymakers accountable for creating a fair and sustainable housing market.
That's the goal.
So we've been talking about these policy solutions,
Yeah.
these innovative financing models. But the paper also highlights the importance of exploring alternative housing models as well.
It does.
So tell me more about that. What kind of alternatives are we talking about?
Well, one example is cooperative housing,
Okay.
where residents collectively own and manage their building.
So instead of each individual owning their own unit,
Right.
they all share ownership of the building
Exactly.
and make decisions together.
It's a model that's been successful in other parts of the world,
Okay.
and the paper suggests that it could be a viable option in Malaysia as well.
Are there any other models that they talk about?
Yeah, they also talk about community land trusts,
Okay.
which are nonprofit organizations that own land
Okay.
and lease it out to residents at affordable rates.
So like taking the land out of the speculative market completely.
Exactly, ensuring that it remains dedicated to affordable housing.
That's really interesting.
It's a really innovative approach,
Yeah.
and it highlights the fact that there are many different ways to approach this challenge.
Yeah, this is way more complex than I originally thought.
It is.
It's not just about building houses.
Right.
It's about creating a whole system.
It's about creating a system that supports genuine affordability
Right.
and promotes social equity.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it.
Yeah, the paper really drives home the point that affordable housing is a multifaceted issue
Okay.
with social, economic, and political dimensions.
So we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
From the challenges faced by developers to the potential solutions that the research has proposed.
Yeah.
But before we wrap up, I'm curious about something.
All right.
This paper focuses on the economic and institutional challenges
Right.
to building affordable housing. But what about the human side of this issue?
That's a great question, and it's something that's really important to consider.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We were talking about some pretty complex stuff before the break.
Yeah.
All these challenges around building affordable housing in Malaysia. But I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about the people.
Yeah.
You know, the actual human impact of this crisis.
Absolutely, because behind all the data and the policy talk,
Right.
there are real people whose lives are being affected.
Exactly. And this paper that we've been looking at doesn't just present numbers.
Right.
It actually shares some stories of people
It does.
who are struggling to find a place to live.
Yeah, it captures the voices of those who are really feeling the effects of this housing crunch.
And I'm sure that, you know, living in Malaysia, you've seen firsthand
I have.
how this crisis is impacting families and communities.
Yeah, it's really tough to see.
Yeah.
You know, the paper talks about young families who are forced to live with their parents or in cramped and substandard housing
Right.
because they just can't afford a decent place of their own.
And it's not just about having a roof over your head.
No, it's not.
It's about having a place where you can build a life,
Right.
raise a family,
Yeah.
feel like you belong.
The paper talks about the psychological toll of housing insecurity, you know, the stress of constantly moving, the strain on relationships,
Yeah.
and just this feeling of hopelessness that sets in when, you know, owning a home just feels impossible.
Right. It becomes this impossible dream.
It does, and it's a reminder that affordable housing isn't just an economic issue.
Right.
It's a social justice issue.
Exactly. Everyone deserves to have a safe and decent and affordable place to live.
I completely agree, and the paper makes a really strong case for why addressing this crisis is essential for Malaysia's future.
Okay.
It's about creating a society where everyone has a chance to thrive.
Not just survive.
Exactly.
And we've talked about, you know, policy solutions and different financing models and even alternative housing options. But it seems like ultimately the key to solving this problem is changing the way we think about housing.
Yeah, I think you're right. We need to move away from this idea of housing as just a commodity
Okay.
or an investment or a status
We
symbol.
need to see it as a basic human right, just
Exactly.
a foundation for well-being.
Absolutely. And that shift in mindset needs to happen at every level, from policymakers to developers
Mm.
to individuals.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
So as we wrap up our deep dive on affordable housing in Malaysia,
Mm-hmm.
what's the one message you want listeners to take away from this?
That's a good question.
Well, I think the challenge of affordable housing is complex,
Yeah.
but it's not impossible to solve.
Okay.
There are solutions out there,
Mm-hmm.
but they require a collective effort.
Okay.
We need to demand better from our leaders,
Okay.
support innovative ideas, and hold ourselves accountable for making choices that put people over profit.
That's a great message. I love that.
And for anyone who's feeling inspired to learn more
Mm.
or get involved, I highly recommend checking out this research paper.
Yeah, the full title is Building Affordable Housing in Urban Malaysia: Economic and Institutional Challenges to Housing Developers.
Yes, that's the one. And it really is a thought-provoking read.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive.
It was my pleasure.
And until next time, keep exploring, keep
Yeah.
learning, and keep asking those tough questions.